name is Terry Hester. I'm a partner at H&L Bee Farm, and our mission in this video is to teach you, the beekeeper, how to successfully produce your own queens. Queen breeding is a very big part of our business here, and as many of you know, we produce only the Minnesota hygienic Italian queens. Queen breeding is the most fascinating part of beekeeping as far as I'm concerned, and true quality queens is required to have productive hives in the field. So with that said, we're going to go over our program that actually I'm going to follow the same format that we use in our queen rearing training school. And so you'll see me reading direct from the paper because I want this video to duplicate exactly the process used in our training school, and which duplicates the method we use here at H&L Bee Farm to produce queens. So with that said, I'm going to start following the format. Okay, the first section of this is queen breeding basics. Every fertile egg a queen lays has a potential to become a worker bee or a queen. In 3 days, the egg will hatch into a tiny larva. At first, all larvae are fed royal jelly by the nurse bees. If the colony has a queen and happy with their queen, this larva gets fed regular food after the first 24 hours and will become a regular female worker bee that will require 21 days to hatch. Now, on the other hand, if the colony has lost their queen, decides it's time to swarm, or they are not satisfied with their queen, they will begin the process of making a new queen. In this case, the bees select a fresh hatched larvae and keep it fed pure royal jelly while drawing out a large peanut-shaped cell for the larva to develop in. Since this larva is fed nothing but the rich royal jelly, it grows fast, larger, and develops ovaries. The bees will seal this cell off full of royal jelly 9 days from the day the egg was laid. 7 days later, the new queen will emerge on the 16th day from when the egg was laid. The fresh hatched virgin queen wastes no time in seeking and destroying any other queen cells that may be developing in the hive. If 2 virgins hatch at the same time, they will fight to the death, and one or both may die. This is often why a hive can wind up without a queen and can turn into a laying worker if not repaired soon enough by adding another queen. After the new virgin queen sets up housekeeping for 2 or 3 days, she will go out on her mating flight, and this is risky business, as other worker bees from other hives and dragonflies are hostile to virgin queens. Because of this, she will fly straight up to an altitude of about 50 feet and mate 10 to 14 times with other drones. While the queen is on her mating flight, the hive from which she came will appear to be swarming. This is because the other bees from the hive are out there flying around to help guide her back to the right location. Once she returns, everyone goes back inside and returns to business as usual. From this point, it usually takes 10 days or so before she starts laying her eggs, sometimes less. It depends on the situation, and I think a lot of it has to do with the nectar flowing area and the weather. A good rule of thumb in queen rearing is from the time you put a breeder frame into the breeder hive, do the graft, and to having a laying queen and a mating nuke is about 28 days. Now that we understand nature's side of queen production, we will move on to the tools needed and the things we must do to motivate our bees to produce quality queens. So the next portion of this video, I'm going to be going over the various tools and things we use at H&L Bee Farm with our commercial queen breeding program. Okay, tools for queen breeding, and we're going to go over these as they're listed in order. Okay, number 1 on our program is breeder hives. Now we'll cover that at another time when we're outside and I can actually show you the breeder hives that we use. The next thing is the breeder frames. The breeder frames are simply a frame with old drawn out dark wax that we have taken certain steps to ensure that it's clean and fresh, and we like the dark wax because we can see the larvae when we do the graft. There again, we'll go over that in just a few minutes. The next thing that's required, number 3 on the list, is the wax and the wax melter. We have found that this 18-quart roaster oven makes an excellent wax melter. And I'm not going to get into a lot of details now because there again, later in the video, you're going to see us using the wax melter and how to make your cell bars and cell cups. But it has a double-lined pan, which serves the same purpose, kind of like a double boiler. So the temperature range on this wax melter goes from 0 to 450. Normal working with the beeswax, you're going to be somewhere around 200 degrees. We sometimes dial it up high to get the wax melted, but I caution you, when you do that, be sure you're watching it, because if you leave it too long, it can scorch your wax and burn it up. But generally, when you're using your wax melter, you will not ever use it full of wax to the full capacity of the tub. My experience has been about 10 pounds of good, clean, yellow beeswax is what you need here. But the wax melter is used with the wax cell cut jig and with your cell bars, which comes with the kit. And you make your cell cuts, and then you make dip the cell bars, and then you come back and weld the cell cuts onto the cell bars, and we'll go over all that step by step. But that's the purpose of the wax melter, is simply to melt your wax so you can make your own cell cuts and cell bars. And by being able to do so, it saves a lot of money in having to buy store-bought plastic parts and different things that's offered in other bee supply companies. This enables you to make just a few or as many as you want to. Okay, number 4 is a cell cup jig, which we've already touched base on this. This cell cup jig has pegs that are rounded off on the end. In order to make cell cuts, it sits in a pan of water. You want it about 1 inch deep in water at all times, and the reason you leave it soaking in the water is when you dip it in the wax, it makes the cell cups able to be released. And there again, we'll go over this later. You'll see it done out here when we do the hands-on part of making the cell cups. Okay. Your cell bars is the number 5 thing that comes with your kit. Our kit comes with 10 bars. Each bar has 12 wooden cell cut pegs that are glued onto the bars. Once these are wax coated, the cell cups are welded on. You can add the queen hatching cages to them after the cells are sealed over, which we'll get into all that later. Okay, of course you got to have your frames, which is number 6 on the list. If you notice, the cell bar frames are painted red. We do this so that when they're in the hive, there's no mistake of where the cell bars are being located. And your cell bars go in here, which they fit a little loose now, but once they're dipped in wax and all, they'll fit snug and firmly and stay in place. And each frame holds 2 cell bars, like so. Welding iron. Now this one's still enclosed in the pack. It's a pencil type soldering iron. When you plug it in, it's what's used to melt the wax and place your cell cups on your cell bars. You'll need a pair of tongs. Tongs are used when dipping the bars in and out of the wax so you don't risk getting your fingers or hands down in the hot wax. Okay. Grafting tool. Absolutely one of the most important tools you will need, you may can zoom this up, is a grafting tool. The tool we use is a Chinese grafting tool. The grafting tool is designed so that you can graft those tiny larvae out of the cell cup, out of the breeder frame, and then put them down into the cell cups. And there again, we're going to go over this later. but this Chinese grafting tool has a push button that actually assists in pushing that tiny larva off the tip and into the cell cup. And we'll get into more detail with this later as we go through the video. But you have to have a grafting tool. Another very important part to producing queens is a headset magnifier. This is a special headset magnifier that works great for queen grafting, for grafting larvas. This unit actually is a two-part deal. It's a headset magnifier. It's got an adjustable headband, so one size will fit. You can adjust it to fit any size head. The other thing is it has a battery pack on the side with a light, and which I don't have batteries in this one as it's brand new. But to turn it on, you simply turn the lens on the light, and it beams the light, and the light's fully adjustable so that when you're actually grafting, you can adjust it to see exactly where you need it to. Okay. Grafting easel. This is an item that we build exclusively. Our grafting easel is designed it's got multiple adjustments. I'll turn this around so you can see the back side of it. You can adjust it here, 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 up to this depth. The grafting easel allows you to place your breeder frame here, and you sit in front of it with your headset magnifier and graft the larva. And there again, we're going to get into more details on that when we do the shop portion of the video. Another great thing about our grafting easel is it allows you to put all your stuff, your basic tools, grafting needle, things you need, more convenient location. Has a latch on top, and then a handle that can be picked up and carried anywhere. We've designed this so that you can keep all your basic components for your queen rearing in one location, and you'll always know where your tools are when you need them. Number 12 on the list is wet towels. We'll cover that later. The wet towels are used to keep the larvae from drying out while transporting the breeder frames or the grafted bars to the hives. Transport hive with a bottom is simply a 10-frame hive that has a bottom board screwed on so it's attached permanently. You can place wet towels, damp towels in the bottom, and then you put your larva or you put your grafted bars of cell bar frames in there and then put another damp towel on top. That way when you're moving from the grafting house back and forth, you keep your larvae damp. Number 14 is starter hives. We'll go over that later. Simply put, the starter hive is simply a hive that's been made queenless. And just prior to you doing the graft, you actually go through that starter hive again, shake all the bees off or brush them off, and make sure they have not started any queen cells. So in other words, it's a queenless hive, and the objective is to have that hive with no queen cells started so that when you put your graft in, the bees focus solely on that starter hive. Next is finisher hives. We'll go over that later as well. Finisher hives is a hive like a double deep hive that actually has a queen in the bottom, but she's kept underneath the queen excluder, and then you have pulled young brood, open brood, milk brood up above the queen excluder, so it has lots of nurse bees up top. And since once the cells are started in the starter hive, and then you transfer them to the finisher hive, even though they have a queen, because of the fact those cells are already started, the nurse bees will finish feeding those cells for you. Thus, you freed up your starter hive so you can come in with another gram, and you divided the workload between the nurse bees and the starters and the finishers, so you're not overworking your nurse bees. The objective is always to make sure that your larvae are fed properly so that they develop fully. One of the biggest mistakes in people breeding queens is putting too many cells in a starter or a finisher and not keeping enough feed there. And one of the big secrets to producing good quality queens is how that larva is fed in those beginning days of its life. Okay, so we've got finisher, starter, finisher hives covered. Next is the hair roller cages. Each kit comes with, it starts off with a package of 20. We refer to these as our queen hatching cages. The difference in the way we produce queens at H&L Bee Farm than a lot of other commercial queen breeders is, you may have heard a lot of people say they get queen cells and put them in mating nukes. Well, over the years we have found that oftentimes those cells didn't hatch. And so we developed this program so that once the cell is sealed off, we place our queen hatching cages over the cell, in which there again it fits loose now because there's no wax, but once this cell button is waxed over and has the beeswax on there, it fits good and snug. And these will be placed over all the cells, thus allowing the virgin queens to hatch in the cell cup. And by being confined in this cage, the nurse bees in the hive will feed the virgin queens through this cage and actually allow them, it actually allows the nurse bees to cull out any inferior queens. We never harvest our virgin queens until at least 2 days after they've hatched. The reason being, we have found that if the bees know more than we do, and if for some reason there's an issue with a virgin queen that bees don't like, they just simply won't feed them, and they'll die. So this helps us ensure quality queens because of the fact when we wait 2 days later, we may have 1 or 2 here or there that's dead, but the ones that are alive generally always turn out to get mated and make beautiful quality queens. Okay. Another thing we're going to go over is your how to make queen candy. And queen candy is simply powdered sugar with corn syrup. You take a big bowl and put a lot of powdered sugar in it. You take your fist and make a little crater in the center and pour a little corn syrup and with a heavy-duty wooden spoon or a stir stick of some kind. You just keep blending the corn syrup in with the powdered sugar until it becomes stiff, and it has to be very stiff like dough. And that is the candy used in both type queen cages, which is the plastic and the wooden cage. All right. Another thing we do is once our virgin queens, when we get ready to harvest them, we want to transfer them from the queen hatching cage, or hair roller cage as they're called, into a regular queen cage. Okay? So let's say that we've got a bar here, and let's just pretend this bar has 12 hair roller cages with virgin queens running up and down in it. Well, first thing we would do is take this little plastic queen cage, and it snaps together, and we leave the lid closed. And then you take your queen candy and you push this in until this tube is completely filled with candy. Don't make a mistake of filling it half full or just a little bit in. You want to fill this tube up completely. That prevents this, once you put this queen in here, it prevents her from running down that tube and getting stuck halfway down. Okay? But what we do is take our cell bar that has our hatching cages and the virgin queens, you'll see them running up and down, and we spray through this cage with sugar water so that the virgin queen's wings gets coated. If you skip this step, you're going to lose some queens because they'll fast to fly off. So we spray through here with sugar water, and then we have prepared our little push-in plastic cages, and then we simply shake the queen out on the table, pick her up by the wings, put her in here, and close it up. And later we will show you how we bank these if we're not ready to use them. But once we cage them, this is the actual cage, the plastic push-in cage that we put in our mating nukes so that the virgin queens can emerge, and the time it takes the bees to eat through the candy allows them to accept her. So the little plastic push-in cage is ideal for installing virgin queens. Okay. Another thing you're going to need in your queen rearing operation is what we call drone hives. And you need the area where your mating nukes are set up. You need to have a lot of drones, because without drones, the virgin queens can't get mated. And we'll go over that later. But there's special frames that you can use for the drone hives so that you produce a lot of drones in the area. And next, you're going to need wood queen cages, which is the standard. I don't have one in here, but it's a standard wood cage. It's got candy in one end like you're used to buying queens from. And we use the wooden cages for all mated queens that we ship out. And the wood cage allows you to put attendants in with the queen so they can be shipped out. And that should pretty well cover the tools and materials that you're going to need for queen rearing. And what we're going to do next is we're going to start going through this stuff step by step so you can see all the process from start to finish as we go along and present to you our queen breeding program. Okay, number one on the list of things you will need to do your queen operation is breeder hives. The very first thing you will need to begin your queen breeding program is breeder hives with breeder queens in them, as you can see in front of the camera. Our breeder hives are 5-frame garden hives, also known as nukes. In our operation, we run 6 of these. They are numbered 1 through 6 and are located on a rack near our grafting room. If you are doing small grafts, 1 or 2 of these may be all you need. We run 6 so that we are certain to have larvae, the right age larvae, on our scheduled graft day. However, 1 frame of larvae is all that's needed to do a big graft of several hundred. The queens in these hives are called breeder queens. They are very special, and we constantly check the brood frames in these hives for queen cells to prevent losing a breeder queen. We run them double deep with the queen under a 5-frame queen excluder in the bottom chamber. This allows the bees plenty of room so they are not as likely to develop swarm cells. Also, the upper chamber is a good place to bank virgin queens from an earlier hatch. This also helps keep their minds off swarming. Once we set up our graft schedule, the top chamber is lifted off and our numbered breeder frame is installed in the center of the bottom chamber. By putting this frame in the center with 2 full frames on each side of it, the queen basically has nowhere else to lay except on our breeder frame when we want her to. You can also refer to our graft example for more details. Now in a few minutes we're going to discuss the breeder frames, and then we'll come back later and you will see us actually install the breeder frames into these breeder hives, and we'll remove out the ones that we're going to graft from today. Okay, number 2 on the list is your breeder frames. The breeder frame is simply an old dark comb drawn out brood frame that had been previously used in another hive. The darker the wax, the better. And the reason is that when you do the graft, it actually helps you see the larvae, the darker the wax. Sometimes we have to graft off some not as dark as the one shown here, but we we try to find the darkest possible. I put them in a freezer for a couple of days. This will take care of any critters or unwanted pests that may be hiding in them. Once they thaw out, I prop them up on the ends, use a water hose and spray nozzle, wash them out good by spraying directly into the cells on both sides of them. Then we shake the excess water out of them by sticking them in a hive body and allow them to dry in the sun. After they dry, I use my queen marking pen and write BF on both ends of the top bar. In our case, we have 6 breeder hives, so I number them 1 through 6 on the top bar. In other words, we keep 12 of them maintained so that while 6 is in the breeder hives, 6 are in the freezer safe from wax moths. By having them numbered, we know which frame went into which breeder hive. On graft day, we pull one from the center of each breeder hive gently and brush the bees back into the hive. Then gently add the proper numbered fresh breeder frame in its place. So one comes out and the next goes in at the same time, thus starting the next graft schedule. Once the graft is complete, all breeder frames are washed out with a spray nozzle and returned to the freezer for protection. Don't be tempted to use the brood left over from the graft in other hives, or you will find yourself constantly searching for breeder frames, and new started breeder frames do not get the results as the ones that are maintained just for breeder frames. As you can see, he's washing out the breeder frame, and this is how we shake them out. Okay, number 3 on the list in our queen rearing program is the wax melter and wax management. In this section of the video, we're going to go over dipping the cell bars, making the cell cups, and welding the cell cups onto the cell bars. So first I'm going to read to you direct from the program so it matches our scheduled program. Our wax melter is an 18-quart roaster oven with temperature ranges from 0 to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. It is rectangular shaped with a removable pan, which makes it ideal for working with wax. The wax melter is vital for making your wax cell cups and dipping your cell bars. One should never leave the wax melter unattended nor have the temperature above 200 degrees except in situations when you need to strain the wax into another pan or get the wax melted sooner. Once your wax is melted, it is very important to turn the temperature down to the point that the wax is skimming around the edges of the pan. This is where the wax needs to be for making cell cups and for dipping cell bars. Remember, hot wax can flame up, so never operate your wax melter without having a fire extinguisher handy. Do not have any open flames near the melter. When not in use, unplug the melter to prevent it from being accidentally turned on. Never have your wax level above half full in the pan. This will prevent it from sloshing out at times when you remove the hot wax for straining. It will be necessary at times to strain your wax. Never do this while intoxicated or if you're a person that is prone to dropping things. Trust me, you do not want to slosh out hot wax or drop a pan of melted wax. So here's the way we do it. First of all, turn the melter up so that all the wax is melted, but not to the point it's scorching and putting off a lot of smoke. Then take a tarp or drop cloth and spread it out on the floor and place a large metal pot such as a turkey fryer in the center of it on the floor. Place a framed window screen over the pot. Turn off the melter. Put on a pair of baker's mittens and use your hive tool to pry the pan up out of the melter to the point you can lift the pan out. Once you have a secure grip on the pan, gradually pour the melted wax out of one of the corners of the pan through the screen and into the metal pot below. Now, if your pan needs scraping or washing out, you can do it at this time. However, one of the things I enjoy about queen rearing is I really enjoy making the cell cups and the cell bars. As we showed earlier, this is one of the cell bars that came in the kit. And normally, I like to make all my cell cups in advance while my wax is new and clean, because you want to use as clear wax as possible to make your cell cups. As you can see, when I make a few cups, I put them in the, I use these little plastic containers. You can use a quart jar or anything. And I make several cups in advance, like to the tune of maybe even 1,000 or so ahead. And make all the cups while I've got new fresh wax. And by the way, when I put the wax in the pan, I like to put about 10 pounds of wax. 10 to 12 pounds is the right amount of wax for this melter. Right now I'm running about 6 pounds, which is, it's a little shallow. And we just got this wax melted. And because it is still a little hot, I'm gonna go ahead and pre-dip my bars, and then we'll come back in a minute and make some cell cups. But to pre-dip the bars, you simply take a pair of tongs, lay your bar in, and just move it around so the entire bar gets coated with wax, and then you just pick it up, shake the excess wax back into the melter, and then I'm just going to simply lay this bar to the side for it to cool and dry. The reason for wax coating the bars is it puts this good coating of wax over the entire bar, and it also helps the bar when I put the frame bar into the cell bar frame. By having this wax layer on the ends, it makes it not as likely to be falling out and everything. But it just seems like the bees accept the graft better if that whole entire bar is coated with wax. So while our wax is hot, we're going to go ahead and coat them. And then in just a few minutes, I'll show you how to do the final coat on the cell bars, because we have to build up and we have to do that as well when the wax is cooler. But now that I have this bar coated, the next step will be I will actually turn this bar upside down and dip it into the wax and hold it up for a short period of time, allowing a bead of wax to build on the head of this wooden cell cup button. The reason for that is that gives me a puddle of wax, so when I use the welding iron to glue the cell cup on, it gives me some wax to melt to set the cell cup in. And we'll go over that in just a few minutes. Okay, our wax has cooled down a little bit. It's beginning to get to the point where you make cell cups. So if you see how, first I'm going to go ahead and put my wax bead on the heads of my cell cup buttons. So if you see how I've got this grip, I'm going to come in and dip just the button portion down into the wax. I'm not dipping the entire bar, and I'll do it a couple of times, because what I want to ensure is that I've got a good bead of wax on the end of that. Now I'm going to hold this up above the wax melter for just a few seconds so the wax begins to set up. Okay, now I can turn it over, and if you can see here, we have got a bead of wax on top of this bar, and that will allow us to use our welding iron and make a puddle of wax and then place the cell cup in there when we get ready to put them on. We'll cover that in just a minute. So I'm going to continue doing these bars and get the wax beads on the buttons of these bars, and then we will come back and make some cell cups. Oh yeah, good coat of wax there. That's what we gotta have. Now, a good time to do all this wax working is between the time that you put your breeder frames in the breeder hives. You've got, 4 or 5 days there that you can get all this prep work done. That way when graft day comes, you're ready to do your graft, and you don't have to wait while you're making up your cell bars and cell cups and so forth. And what I like to do is, once I weld my cell cups onto my cell bars, is keep them stored in the refrigerator so that they don't get full of dust and dirt and atmospheric soils, and they're just safe, and they're well protected by being inside this old refrigerator over here. Now I have dip these bars by hand, but for the video purpose, I'm showing you to use these tongs. I will demonstrate to you, though, how I do by hand. But I've done this enough that I know not to stick my fingers in this hot wax down below. Because all I'm doing is allowing just the wood buttons to touch the wax. I really recommend, though, especially unless you've got experience, that you use the tongs. Okay, now our wax is getting just about right to really make cell cups. As you can see, it's starting to skim a little bit around here. So what I do is keep an old wooden stick that I can keep it broken up. Because you want it slightly skimming so that it makes the cell cups, the walls of the cell cups, thick enough that they do the job. So what I'll do is knock some of the skim wax out of the way. Then, using the wax jig that comes with the kit, which is sitting in a pan of water. You leave it sitting in a pan of water, and you have to, after each session of making cell cups, you want to put it back in the pan of water. But I'll pick it up and just give it a quick shake, swings the excess water off, and then drop it in. And what your objective is about a 1/2 inch deep cell cup. See, I drop it in, and if you notice, the wax is beginning to readily harden as I pull it back up. And I'll dip it several times. And each time I dip it, I give it a little quick shake. And boy, this wax is really cooling off fast. You can see there it's building the depth into the walls of the cell cup. Then I'll turn it over. And as you can see, the wax cell cups, and these are actually, this is actually skimming a little too much. I'm going to turn the heat up to about 150, 175, and then I'm going to give it another stir. Break the wax up. It's kind of a thin line you have to walk when making cell cups. But if you've got your wax too hot, you definitely cannot make cell cups. So to remove the cups, I simply take my thumb and forefinger and just give it a twist, just like I was unscrewing a screw. And even though this cup may look a little rough on the outside, it makes a nice round cell cup on the inside. So I'm just going to lay them off in this little plastic top here as I take them off for now, and that allows them to cool a little bit before I put them in the container. Then I'm going to turn the heat on up a little bit. That's really skimming fast. Not the best looking cups in the world. I'll actually let my wax get a little too cool. They'll get the job done now. One thing's for sure, using real wax cell cups gets you a lot better acceptance for queen production than the store-bought plastic cups that you can buy. It's just something about using the real beeswax that makes all the difference in the world in your percentage of your takes on your graphs. But I stress again, it's important to use nice, clean wax. So I'm going to put the jig back into the water pan. We're going to stir up this wax. We turn the heat up a little bit so it should begin to dissolve. It takes a little working with it to get it just right. We want it to the point it's trying to skim up, but we don't want it to skim up to the point that it makes rough looking cell cups on the outside. Once we get it just right, we'll be able to sit here and just crank out several cell cups at a time. I think the ideal range for this, we get it stabilized, is around 200 degrees, about 185, 200 degrees. Let's give it another whirl and see what we can do. And with time and practice, you'll learn to hold your cell cup jig steady. Yeah, looks pretty good there. Now that's the kind of cell cups I'm looking for. And back in the water pan with the wax jig. Shake it off. Do another dip. The longer you hold this out, you can actually come back. If you want to make really thick wall cell cups, you can come back and dip again, and that just fattens them right up. Dump these in the container, like so. You see, that one was a little hot, and it broke up. Okay, we've got the wax melter out of the way and the wax jig, cup jig, and now it's time to weld our cell cups onto the cell bar. And the way I do this, of course, here is the pencil soldering iron that we use. This also is one of the items that comes with the queen rearing kit. And to do this, you simply you can hold the bar between your thumb and forefinger when you're grafting, but when I weld the cell cups on, I lay it down flat. I pick up one cell cup with my left hand, and since I'm right-handed, I use the iron with my right hand, and I put the tip of the welding iron just in the center of the cell cup so it makes a cradle. And then while the wax is hot, I stick the cup in straight up. And of course, if you got a little piece of wax on top, you can use your iron to melt it off. But then you just simply go down the line and weld your cell cups onto your cell bar. It's important to try to have your cup in the center of the cell button, because once this cell is sealed off by the bees and has a larva, a queen larva inside, we're going to come back and be able to slide the queen hatching cages over the cell. So therefore, it's important that the cell be sealed off in the center of the cup. And this is a finished cell bar, ready to be grafted into. So rather than sit here and film us doing all these, I'm going to set this to the side. We're going to cut the video at this time, and then we'll come back later and go over the rest of the process. Okay, now that we have got our cell cups welded onto our cell bars, they're sitting here ready to do the graft, and I just want to go over and recap some things. We've covered number 4, which is the cell cup jig, the water pan, and making the cell cups. I want to do a little recap here on number 5, which is the cell bars, number 6, the cell bar frames, number 7, the welding iron, and of course number 8 was the tongs on the lids. Now we're going to discuss some queen rearing and explain the difference in our queen breeding programs than that of others. It is all based on breeding quality queens with a process which allows us flexibility and the ability to verify each and every virgin queen we introduce into our mating nukes. We do not put cells in mating newts. We put live virgin queens that pass our inspection. Cells never hatch 100%, and some yield queens with defects or no wings. Our cell bars and cell bar frames are designed the way they are for this reason. Our cell bar frames will hold 2 cell bars, and this is a cell bar frame. And if you notice, we've got it painted a bright red color. By doing so, it's easily identified when it's in the hive. Each cell bar has 12 round cell pads. That's little round wooden, you might have heard me call them wooden cell cup holders earlier, but it's the proper name is the cell pads that the wax cups are welded on top of and grafted into. They are spaced apart on the frame so that when the cells are sealed over, we can add our queen hatching cages, also known as hair rollers, thus putting us in charge of the situation. Since the bees know more than we do, we allow the virgin queens to hatch inside the hair roller cages and wait a couple of days after the hatch before harvesting them. The bees in the hive will reject and not feed any virgins that are not quality. To make up the cell bars, your wax melter can have a little more heat than when making the cups. You don't want it skimming up while dipping the bars. Using a pair of tongs or a sharp-pointed knife stuck into the wood of the bar, dip the entire bar into the wax so it's coated. Now, we've already went over that, so we're not going to go back through that part of the section. But the hair roller cage or queen hatching cage is designed, our system is designed so that once this cell is sealed over, we place that cage and you can see how it fits firmly. This allows the virgin queen to hatch in here. And as it says in our program, we allow this to stay in the hive for a couple of days after the queens hatch, because the virgin queens will be in here. The nurse bees will gather on these cages and they will feed these virgin queens. However, if that virgin queen is not quality or there's something wrong with it, the bees know more than we do and they will not feed that virgin queen. So at times when we harvest these virgin queens, we may have 2 or 3 on a bar that's simply dead. But that lets us know, and this is what sets our queen breeding program apart from many other queen breeders, is the fact that we know when we harvest this virgin queen, we've got a quality queen. Now, at this time, I'm not going to get into how we transfer the queens from this into the other other cages, but we'll do that later in the series. There's a few things we want to do before we go get the breeder frames from the breeder hives. To start with, we're going to get our grafting easel staged. We're going to get our cell bars placed, and since I'm right-handed, I place my cell bars on the left side so that as I graft, I move them to the right side to prevent getting them mixed up. The other thing we want to do is take our headset magnifier and we want to get it set up on the headset. We've got a little battery pack that clips on the side, and then it has a little light that clamps on top. This is absolutely one of the most essential tools in grafting is being able to see the tiny larvae. And this light's designed so when you turn the lens, the light comes on and off. Okay, this particular headset is made specifically for our type operation here, and it uses a 2.5 magnification at 8-inch depth perception, which allows you the working space needed to graft the larvae. Okay, but now I've put this on the headset, the lights on the headset magnifier. I've got it centered up, and I've ensured that my light's working, and it has fresh batteries because I only use these. He uses 2 AA batteries, and I only used it one time, and that was the last graft. So the headset magnifier is set up, it's working. This is just simply an old case that, like you get a glasses case or something. I use it to store my grafting tools in. And so in this case, I'm going to pull out my Chinese grafting tool, and I'm going to make sure it's okay and working properly. And a lot of times after using these grafting tools, they get kind of stuck and they need to be loosened up. And really what's best sometimes is just run plain water over them. of times you can take the tip and just kind of pry it away from the wood and start working the button, push button, and that ensures it works. Can you zoom up on that grafting needle?
That's what I was trying to do there.
And when we graft with the grafting needle, I hold it between my thumb and forefinger, just like this, and I reach in the cell cup, graft the larva, and then when I put the grafting needle down in the cell cup, I push the larva off by pushing the button and drag it out, which we'll get into that in more detail as we do the graft. But the main thing here is to make sure that you've got your tools in place, everything's working properly, and that you're completely set up and ready to do the graft. And then, of course, this grafting easel is designed with a storage area in the back, which is where the headset magnifier and the light stays at times when you're not using it. I've got a special little, like a jewelry box here that actually I break down the light and keep it in here and keep it closed up with a rubber band around it when not in use, and it stays inside my grafting easel. And then I've got the original box that my headset magnifier came in, and it as well stays in the grafting easel at times when I'm not using it. And of course our grafting easels have a latch on top. This allows you to keep all your tools for queen rearing in one place and always know where they are when the time comes you need them. Another thing we have to do prior to this particular graft, and it's kind of causing me to get off the program schedule just a little bit, is we started new starter hives. We put the breeder frames in for this graft on Tuesday. Today being Sunday is the 5th day from the day the breeder frames went in. Therefore, also on Tuesday, we made up the 2 starter hives for this particular graft, which I'll explain the starter hives when we get up in the field. But we have to go through these starter hives and check every frame and kill any queen cells that they have started on their own, so that once we do this graft and put it in those starter hives, they readily accept our cells. If we allowed the cells to stay in the starter hives, what would happen is, number one, they would hatch prior to our grafts and they would destroy our grafts. Secondly, we want to kill every cell just an hour or so before we do this graft that's in those starter hives, because once we put this graft in with these fresh larvae, we want the bees focusing on our graft rather than ignoring our graft because they've already got cells in the hive. And we'll go over that in more details up here in just a minute as we go through the starter hives. So what we have to do now is go through the starter hives, check for queen cells, kill any of them, and then once that's done, then we're going to go in the breeder hives, the ones we showed you earlier, and we're going to install a new breeder frame and take out the one that we're going to graft from with the larvae. And so that's where we're at with this process. So the next thing we're going to do is get ready to do, the queen rearing part and the grafting. And when I get back here with the breeder frames, I will try to teach you how to graft, and that's part of queen rearing that really puzzles a lot of people, is the grafting part. But it's really very simple, especially with a Chinese grafting tool. I've tried other grafting tools that's on the market, and to this day have never been able to pick up a larva with them. But this little Chinese grafting tool will do the job, and we'll go over all that when we get back. Okay, number 14, starter hives. Simply put, a starter hive is a hive used to put grafted cells into which the queen has been removed prior to the graft. With that said, let's take a look at some things to consider when setting up a starter hive. First of all, it takes a lot of nurse bees to start cells. So the hive selected must be very strong and congested with bees, or made up to be strong. Often we make starter hives up by combining brood and bees from multiple hives that are strong. This is done by going into a strong hive, taking every other frame out, and shaking or brushing the bees back into the hive. Stack the beeless brood frames outside the hive, then push together the remaining frames and bees in the original hive so they are centered in the middle. Put empty or drawn out frames back into the original hive to make up for the ones you took out on the outside of the original frames. Then add a queen excluder, high body on top, and replace the beeless brood frames in the center of the top high body above the excluder. Use
empty or drawn out frames on the outside of them as well. Then close the hive up. After 24 hours, you can remove the frames of bees and brood from the top chamber and combine them in a separate hive with bees and brood from other hives that you have staged the same way to make one strong congested starter hive. But the simple thing to do is go in a strong hive and remove the queen a few days prior to the graft. Then 1 hour before doing the graft, go through that hive and kill any queen cells that have been started. That's exactly what we're doing right now as you're watching this video. Starter hives can be maintained by adding sealed brood from other hives each week and by checking and killing any queen cells every 5 days. It is very important to stay on top of starter hives by checking them every 5 days and removing any queen cells that have been started. However, it is equally important to keep adding brood to them so they have a constant supply of young bees. This also prevents them from going to a laying worker. To maintain starter hives, you have to play the role of a queen by constantly adding brood each week. Once a graft is placed in a starter hive, it can stay for the duration of the queen rearing cycle, or the grafted cells can be moved to a finisher hive after 24 hours, thus allowing another graft to be installed into the starter hives. Starter hives must be fed on them at all times when the graft is installed. Discussing these starter hives, normally we run more starter hives than what you see, these 2 hives. However, we're getting at, we're almost at the 1st of July, and the season's kind of winding down, so we're not doing big grafts like we were earlier in the spring. So when we put frames in, we're actually only going to graft 8 cell bars, which means that we'll only put 2 frames with 2 cell bars each in each of these hives. One of the big mistakes in queen rearing is for people to overwork the starter hives. We never put over 48, 50 cells in a 10-frame starter hive. That way it ensures that the larvae are fed properly. One of the reasons for inferior queens is people overworking the nurse bees when they put too many cells in the hive when they try to get them started. And just as soon as Pat gets through going through these starter hives, we're going to move over and we've got our transport hive with us, and then we will get the breeder frames out of the breeder hives and reinstall the new clean breeder frames in the breeder hives, and then we'll go to the shop and proceed with the grafting process. Okay, now we're back at the breeder hives, and Pat's going to go into breeder hive number 1 here that you can see, the yellow one, and he's lifting the top hive body off because the breeder frame is in the bottom chamber below the queen excluder and it's the very center frame in the hive. And we have our transport hive over here on the buggy. As you can see, if you see it standing on the back, it has a wet towel over the top, and underneath that towel is the new breeder frames that's going in. So what he's going to do is carefully remove the center frame, which is breeder frame number 1, from breeder hive number 1, and he's going to brush the bees off very gently, and then he's going to put it in the transport hive and then replace it with the fresh number 1 frame. You get that brushed off, Pat. Let me look at it and let's see if we got any larvae. If you'll sneak it over here to me. I'll take care of putting it in the box for you. Okay. No, I think all this one's got is honey. I see a few larvae, but it's mostly honey. So let's go down the line and see what happens. We'll go ahead and change it out. It needs washing out anyway.
Where's that frame? I got to get this in there.
Here's your number 1. Go back in. with me and I'll take a look at that one. There's one number 2. Yeah, right now, going down the line. Yeah, let's see what's going on there too. Okay, for the purpose of trying to help you learn to graft, we've made a what we call our homemade version of a big grafting needle. So just imagine that this is a grafting needle, when in reality, the actual grafting needle you're going to use is this little Chinese grafting needle. And to simulate what we're doing when we actually reach in the cell cup to retrieve the larva, I'm going to imagine that this clear jar is a cell cup sticking out in the cell. Okay, so the technique is, when you come in the cell with your grafting tool, you always hold the grafting tool between your thumb and forefinger, like so. Okay, now the grafting tool itself has a wooden spoon on top with a push button on top. Well, as you can see, we don't have a push button or a spring or anything on here. But for retrieving the larva, you don't use the wooden spoon or the push button. The only time you use the wooden spoon and the push button is when you remove the larva into the cell cup that you're grafting in. So what I'm going to try to do here is hold this in a way that you can see the angle. Your cell cup will be sitting up facing you sort of like this. And as you come in with your grafting tool, you want the tip of that tool to ride along the bottom edge of that cell cup, and you just simply push it in until you feel it turn in the bottom of the cell cup. Then you pull straight out. Okay? Here again, you go in on the bottom of the cell cup and allow the tip of the grafting needle to bend to the bottom of the cell cup and pull straight out. You don't want to rub the tops or the sides of your cell when you come out. So you go in, scoop up the larva, pull it straight out. Okay? Now, let's turn this around and pretend like it is a cell cup that you're going to graft into. All right? To remove the larva from the tip, you go straight down in and you let the back side, your larva sitting on top, you let the back side of the tip rest against the bottom, and holding it straight up, you mash the button and slide out and up. Okay? So your little Chinese grafting tool has a push button up here with a spring that pushes that wooden spoon, and that wooden spoon actually will slide the larva off the tip of the thing. So you come in, bend it, push down, slide the tip out from under the larva, and pull straight up again. And that's how you deliver the cup. There's no way on this video for me to show you this little bitty grafting tool. But with time, and if you attend our clean rearing class, you will learn how to do this. And it's very simple once you get the hang of it. It's kind of like learning to ride a bicycle. Once you learn the hang of it, you'll be able to do it. So I'm going to put on my headset magnifier, and I'm going to graft a few larvas here. We're not going to waste a lot of time on this part of it because I don't want my larvas to dry up before I get them back into the hive. So I'm going to put the headset magnifier on. Get it adjusted. We'll turn my light on. And I've got it adjusted so I can see the larvas in the bottom of these cell cups. And like I said, this headset magnifier works on an 8-inch depth perception. Okay, to start with, I'm going to lay this cell bar across the top of my hand, and with my thumb and forefinger, as I graft into each cell, I'm going to walk my fingers back. And that way, I'm marking each cell as I graft it, so I'm not skipping cells or putting larvas in the same cell twice. Okay, so I'm going to start here with it leaning back against my hand. And I'm going to reach in the bottom of the cell, scoop up a larva, going down in, pushing the button, and raising it straight up. It's important to try to place your larva in the center of the cell cup. And you want to be careful not to turn the larva or roll it, because the larva breathes on one side, and if you roll it over, it can drown in the royal jelly. Okay, that's got this bar grafted. Now, as I said earlier, since I'm right-handed, I start off with my cell bars on the left side, and then once I've grafted a cell bar, I move it over to the right side. All right, and just as soon as we get these bars grafted, we're going to take our cell bar frames, and the cell bar frames will go in just like this, and then the next bar will go here, just like so. And immediately after grafting them, we put them in the transportation hive, which has our damp towels, so this keeps our larvae from drying out. So I know I've already grafted this top bar. I'm going to put this one back. We're going to stop the video here, and I'm going to graft these out right quick, and then we'll pick back up filming as we reinstall the grafts into the starter hives. Now that the cells have been grafted, he's installing the cell bar frames into the starter hives. And we had already previously placed empty frames in the location where we wanted the cell bar frames to go. And we've already been through the starter hives and ensured that they were and killed all the queen cells that have been started. So there's no reason now that these bees shouldn't be eager and be wanting queens and jump on these cells. Then in a couple of days, we'll move these cells from these starters into finisher hives, thus allowing us to be able to put another graft in these if we want to. But like I said earlier, you can leave these cells in these starter hives for the duration if you're not needing a lot of queens. So the empty frame comes out and the grafted cell bar frame goes in. And it's amazing, but within 24 hours they will have started any of these cells that they're going to accept. And it's just absolutely amazing how fast the bees get to work on feeding royal jelly to these queens. Now, since these feed jars do have a little feed in them, we're going to use the same jars that has the feed, but we will monitor these very closely, and it's absolutely imperative that when you put fresh larvae, grafted larvae in a starter hive, that you keep plenty of sugar water on that hive so those larvae get fed properly. And if you notice, we only put 2 frames in each starter, which is a total of 48 cells per starter. I have known queen breeders put as many as 172 in a starter, and I just don't believe the larvae can get fed properly if you overwork the nurse bees. Protecting your wax on your breeder frames is a very important step in the process. Now that we've finished using the breeder frames, we've done the grafts, and the grafts are in the starter hives. We're now washing out any larvae or honey that may be in these frames. And once he finishes washing them out with the water hose, then we're going to shake all the excess moisture out, and they'll be stored in the freezer, and this will prevent wax moths or any unwanted critters from contaminating our wax. Okay, another part of queen rearing that we're going to discuss at this time is the queen cages and making the queen candy. If you're going to produce queens, you're going to have to be able to make queen candy and know how to make the cages. So the first thing we're going to do is make a batch of candy. And queen candy is simply made from powdered sugar and corn syrup. So to do this, I've got a small plastic bowl, and I'm going to dump powdered sugar in this bowl till it's about 2/3 full. I'm shake it around, and then since I haven't been able to find a spoon that the handle wouldn't bend on, we've started cutting the stir sticks out of this 3/8" strip of plywood, which makes a pretty good stir stick for stirring the candy. What I'm doing is just kind of knocking the candy to the side, creating a crater in the center of the powdered sugar, so I can start making the queen candy. And one thing that you have to keep in mind about queen candy, it has to be very thick, like very stiff dough. And you don't want to put too much corn syrup in with the powdered sugar to begin with. And it takes a little work to get it to the right consistency. But I just simply start swirling the corn syrup around with a stick in the center of the powdered sugar. And as I spin it around, the corn syrup collects more and more powdered sugar. And we'll have to work with this quite a while until we get it to the consistency that we want it. And it has to be thick enough that so when it's in the queen cages, it will not, melt and run down and run the risk of drowning your queens. And then as we go along, we're going to also discuss 2 different type queen cages that we use. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep working this around, and we'll come back to you as soon as we get it to the right consistency, and then we'll go over making the queen cages. Okay, now that we've been mixing the corn syrup and the powdered sugar with the stir stick, I've got it to the density now that I can work with it with my hands without it getting all over me. So what I do is kind of flatten it out, press it down into the powdered sugar, and keep rolling it over and knead it just like you were kneading dough. I'll rake a little powdered sugar back on top of it and just keep mixing it around. We're still not as stiff as we need to be yet, so I'm going to keep working with it. And we'll get back with you in just a few minutes. Okay, since we were away, as you can see, we've been using up some queen candy, and this little ball of candy is all that's left. And I want to take this time while we have the candy made, and we're at this stage, to show you the 2 different kind of queen cages that you will be using in your queen rearing operation, and the difference between the 2 cages. All right, first of all, which I think is number 18 on the list, is the plastic push-in cage. We primarily use this cage to cage our virgin queens and put them in a bank frame such as this one here. As you can see, we have some virgin queens here in the bank frame. And now with that said, we don't leave virgin queens in here very long. But with our queen rearing system, it allows us to bank these, and we maintain control of the situation. So these virgin queens are now ready to go in mating nukes. As a matter of fact, on this frame, the top row holds 22, the bottom row holds 22, and we're only missing 4 queens here, which means we have 40 live virgin queens on this frame. Now, also, in the process of doing this video, I'm also trying to fill some queen orders and stuff. So I have queen orders for 20-something mated queens. All right, and what we're getting ready to do is we're going to complete making the cages for the mated queens, and then we're going to actually go out and harvest the mated queens from our garden hives, which we use as mating nukes. And then tomorrow, after 24 hours, we will go back and put a virgin queen in the hive where we took it out of. And we'll go over that later in the video, because I'm going to show you how to use push pins to mark and know where you need to put queens in, and so you'll always know what's going on with your mating hives. Okay, but getting back to the queen cage, the little plastic push-in cage we use, and if you notice, I'm just flattening the candy out. And actually, when you get the cage, it comes broken down like this, and it has a little push tab that closes up. So I'm going to simply snap it together, and then I just like a cookie cutter, push the snout of the cage down into the candy, and you can see through here. And what I want to do is fill this cage up until the candy is all the way in the neck of the cage. And the reason being, you don't want the cage partially full, because if you have it partially full, sometimes your queens will go down in there and they'll get stuck in the candy and actually die. So by having it all the way up, the queen has to stay up in the main cavity of the little cage. And you can also use these cages for mated queens. And the benefit of this little plastic cage is you can actually push it in between 2 frames in a hive without having to remove a frame of bees. Okay, so that's the plastic cage. And also, by the way, we do add 20 of these plastic cages in with the queen rearing kit. Okay, the old-timey cage is the wooden cage, and it is a little different animal. The wooden cage we use primarily for shipping mated queens. And first thing is, when you pick up the wooden cage, the first thing you're going to do is put candy in one end of this. It has 3 compartments. One of these compartments gets filled with candy on one end or the other. However, you need to look at the cage, and on the side of the cage, you'll see a little slit cut in. That's an air slot so that the bees inside can get air, even if there's candy in the end. So you always put candy in the end opposite from the slot. And to put candy in it, I simply take a small amount of my queen candy. I roll it up in a little ball. I want to be about the size of a large marble. Roll it up, and then I press the candy in the hole of the cage opposite from the end that has the slot. The slot's on this end, so I've got the candy down on this end. And there you can see that. Okay, the next thing we'll do is, just a minute, we're going to come back and we're going to complete these cages, one of them, and I'll show you how to complete finishing the wooden queen cage. Okay, now these wooden cages we purchased from Walter Kelly Company, who's the leading manufacturer of the little wooden cage. And when you order the cages, I think you can buy them from them in groups of 100, or you can get a box of 1,000. I think our hard cost on these cages is around 13, 14 cents a piece. And they come complete with the wood cage. The next thing we have to have is a little wax paper. That goes over the candy. You just simply lay it over the top of the candy. And then your cages come with some pre-cut screens. So we're going to lay this pre-cut screen over the top of this cage. And I like to hold one finger in the center, hold it in place. And then with a squeeze stapler, you want to aim this squeeze stapler so the staple straddles the bee hole that's in the end. You wouldn't want staple legs sticking down through there. In fact, the ideal staple is a T50 with a 1/4 inch leg staple. Actually, I'm using 3/8 or 1/2 inch staples here, so I'm having to be real careful and straddle my hole. Okay. And then once you have the cage put together, you simply add a cork in the candy end. You won't need to put a cork in the other end until you're ready for it. However, sometimes to prevent, getting off in the field not having a cork, I'll slightly stick the cork in the other end like so. And this will allow me to come back and just simply pull it out when I need it. And then I pick the queen up, put her in here, and put the attendants in with her. And at that time, then we seal it up good with the cork. And that's all you need to know about the wooden cage. So we use two kind of queen cages: wooden cage, plastic cage. Okay. Okay, since we're addressing the issue of queen cages, I'm going to go a step further here, and I'm going to talk about shipping mated queens into queen cage. Now, when you put a mated queen in the wooden cage, you're also going to add 5 to 7 worker bees, or we call them attendant bees, in here with her. These bees will actually eat some of this candy, and they feed the queen, and she survives on the trip. Now, when we ship mated queens, they are put in a flat rate express mail envelope or a priority mail envelope, depending on the customer's request. But we simply take a hole punch and punch holes around the edge of the envelope, before we ship them. So the mated queens go in a wooden cage with the attendants, and in most cases they survive a trip anywhere in the United States without any problems, especially if we ship them express mail, which costs more, but the advantage to the express mail is the fact that we can monitor that shipment. And there's a guaranteed delivery date on express mail, and it automatically carries $100 worth of insurance. Whereas with priority mail, a lot lower shipping rate, however, there's no guarantees by the Postal Service. Okay. Another market that we've developed with H&L Bee Farm is selling virgin queens. Okay. And virgin queens is kind of, selling virgin queens is kind of a new concept, you might say. But it has proven to be very successful. As a queen breeder, we can produce virgin queens by the hundreds or by the thousands, and we're not having to tie up mating boxes and everything to wait till they're bred and verified and everything else. However, on the beekeeper's point of view, if they buy virgin queens, they can get them for a fraction of the cost of a mated queen, and they can simply, if they know when the queens are going to be shipped to them, they can simply go out and make splits and make up some mating nukes, and then they can purchase the virgin queens from us, and the price changes according to the quantity, of course. But the way we ship these is this is a little battery box, and in the bottom of this battery box, it has 20 holes, which will hold 20 of these queen cages. Now, we do not put attendants in the cage with the virgin queen. So what we do is we take some of our queen candy, and in the very bottom of this battery box is a little groove in the bottom. I don't know if you can see that or not, but you push your candy in there, and you do it on one side across from it and at each end. So there's 4 sections inside this battery box that you can put your queen candy in. Then once you have your virgin queens, like these, for example, you can put every how many the customer orders in these slots, standing straight up inside this box, with the candy end pointing down and a tube going down into these slots, and they fit in like this. And like I said, this, you can ship 1, or you can ship up to 20 in this one box. Now, once we have the proper amount of queens in this box that we need for the shipment, we go to one of our starter hives, which is queenless, and we will actually take a frame of bees from inside the starter hive, and we quickly brush a lot of bees in this package and snap the lid closed. Once the lid is snapped closed, we put tape around each end so that there's no chance that this package is going to come open during shipment. All right? And it has vent holes in the bottom and it has vent holes in the top. And this becomes a miniature beehive. It's called a battery box, and it's a plastic battery box. We ordered these from Man Lake. And by having the candy in the bottom of the battery box and the worker bees inside, they literally feed the virgin queens through the cage during shipment and everything. And we've had a good success rate with this. Now, on the virgin queens, we use the large Tyvek express mail shipment only. The only way we ship virgin queens is express mail. And we can actually get 5 of these battery boxes in one of those large Tyvek envelopes, which means we could, in one shipment, ship up to 100 virgin queens. And so I just thought I'd cover that with you while we're discussing, you know, queen cages and candy and everything that goes with this end of it. And I'm kind of jumping ahead of the program as far as our setup queen program, but I wanted you to understand about the battery box and the different cages we use. Okay, what I'm going to show you here is how to remove a virgin queen from the queen hatching cage and then introduce her into the small plastic cage. The number one thing in dealing with virgin queens is spray them with sugar water. And I just hold this to the side and I spray it, and I turn the frame bar upside down so that I ensure that the sugar water coats the virgin queen inside. It's very important that you wet the wings on these queens, because if not, they will fly away fast. So I'm going to also put a little puddle of water in the middle of my worksheet here. And then I remove the hair roller cage by giving it a slight twist. And then I dump the queen out. And they almost always fall out upside down. I don't know if you can see this queen or not, but she's wiggling around in that sugar water. So now she's got a good coat of it. And there's absolutely no way she can fly off. So now I'm going to put her in the cage head first and hold one finger over the cage until I snap the lid. And that's all there is to it. Now she's ready to go into the bait frame, which I'll pull it up and put her on the bait frame. I've got a lot of company down here on the bait frame. They're already feeding these queens, and it just sticks in like so. Okay. Okay, now in this segment we're going to show you how to create your finisher hives. And what we're doing right here is we're going in a hive that's pretty strong. And actually what Pat's getting ready to do is take out 2 frames, brush the bees back into the bottom portion of the hive. Then he's going to stage his brood outside the hive. He's going to skip a frame. Then he's going to take 2 more frames and skip a frame and take 2 more. And then once all the bees are brushed down into the hive, we will add the empty frames on the outside, and you'll see as we go along with this video what we're doing. But what we're actually creating here is we're staging this hive up for a finisher. As we showed earlier, we did the grafts in the starter hives, and now to be able to move the grafts out of the starter hives, we're going to put the grafted cells into the finisher hive above a queen excluder. By brushing all these bees down, we know that the queen will be in the bottom of this hive. And then as soon as we stage it all up, he's going to put a queen excluder on, then add the other hive body, put the brood up top. And after 24 hours, the bees will move up and cover the brood that's in the top. And then they will, since our cells are started, even though this hive has a queen, they will go ahead and draw out our queen cells. Another thing I may add at this point, this is also how we stage up hives if we want to make splits off to create our mating nukes. So this is actually covering 2 portions of the queen rearing process. This situation here, we're doing it so that we're using it as a finisher. But once you brush the bees down in the bottom and the queens in the bottom, After 24 hours, you can simply come back and take 2 frames of bees and brood and put in your garden hive, which you'll use for your mating nukes. Of course, it's a good idea when you're doing this process to wear gloves and use plenty of smoke, because you kind of really get the bees agitated. And see, it's not really necessary for them to look for the queen, because we're brushing all the bees down in the lower chamber. And then once we put the hive back together, we'll put a queen excluder over that, and then the brood will go up top, so we know the queen will be in the bottom. How many frames did you pull, Pat?
5, I need one more.
Yeah, pull one more. Pull that one on the outside. This hive's strong enough, got enough bees. Well, that one doesn't have any brood, does it?
No.
Okay, so get another brood frame.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
Got 2 and 2.
yeah, get another brood frame. Brush that one down. Just be careful, because we don't know where Mama's at. Oh yeah, that's good brood. Okay, now ease all those together and put them in the center. That's right. Okay, and what he's doing now is he's going to pull 6 empty frames out of this other hive body and place them on the outside of the ones he left in there. And like I said, this is the same process you can use to make splits or increases. And even if we're shaking package of bees from hives, we stage it the same way, so that the next day when we come to shake the packages, we don't have to bother looking for a queen. We know where she's at, and because she'll be below the queen excluder. Now what you're seeing him install there is also a beetle blaster. We try to do organic beekeeping as much as possible and avoid using chemicals and pesticides unless it's absolutely necessary. So he just put a beetle blaster in the bottom that's filled with oil. Okay, he put the queen excluder on, now he's putting the hive body. And he's placing all the brood now without any bees back in the center. And in a matter of hours, the bees will balance and they will move up and cover this brood. And you'll have plenty of nurse bees up top. You actually have a mixture just like another complete hive. In normal circumstances, I wouldn't remove this much brood from a hive, but since we're using this to finish cells, we'll still have the benefit of the brood hatching into the hive. Pat, while you got it open, pal, I would go ahead and stage my places where I'm going to put your grafted cells into. There's where you want it, right there. Put one there, and I'd skip one and put another. Okay, and the reason we're doing this is once we remove the cell bar frames from the starters, those 2 yellow frames that's in the center is where we will remove those and put the grafted cells in their place. And like I said, this is a process for staging a hive, whether you're going to use them for finishers, or if you want to make splits, or if you use them to load your nukes or shaking packages of bees. one's pretty strong too, isn't it? Man, it could be.
They get rowdy. This is the record.
Put some smoke on them, buddy. Put some smoke to them. We've already been in them one time today, and they remember it, don't they?
They have to get. Got my arm on fire.
You may need to skip that one, because there ain't no brood on it.
Yeah, I guess I have to put it back in.
That's really the first one you need to keep. You okay?
I'll go ahead and get this.
Hey, if they get too hot before you get out of them now. That'll help calm them down, staging that brood up, because they're congested.
They got the two good ones there.
May need to smoke them off your bars there, buddy.
Huh?
You may need to smoke them off your bars so you don't smash them. Where you putting your frames back in? You don't know where that queen's at.
I get all of them, didn't I?
Don't forget your beetle blaster. Man, those are eel, aren't they?
Yep.
You okay?
Yep. I can, man. I get a little smarter. Yep.
You know, that's a lot of brood to be this time of the year.
Yeah.
Queen's really doing a good job. You okay?
Huh?
You all right?
Just got me one in the back.
I keep that drawn out one kind of in the middle, bud.
Huh?
I keep that drawn out one kind of in the middle.
I did. I put it in
Okay, got you.
I made sure it went in the middle. And I pushed the others around with it. What we're gonna do into it.
What, Pat?
Putting them things in this one or that one. Now go ahead and fix the bank for them. Put them between some brood.
I'm not following you, buddy.
Starters, finishers, starters.
That's
Put
going
some
to be.
interface between two brood. We done that one and that one. I just wanted
We're just staging that one up so we can split some garden houses off of it.
I just know we didn't do the other one. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
We do it.
See, tomorrow we'll make up 2 garden houses off of that one. How many frames of brood did you pull up top?
This one here?
Yeah.
I had 6 like that.
Okay, good.
I put that beetle thing in.
Okay, yesterday, as you saw in the other section of the video, we staged the brood up in these hives. And what Pat has in his hand right now is some started cells that just came out of the starters. And what we're getting ready to do is install them into these finisher hives. And as you can see, within 24 hours how the bees already has these cells started, and they've been feeding the larvae royal jelly. So now we're going to put them in the finisher hives and allow them to finish them up. And now that we've moved the cells from the starters to the finishers, we can turn around now tomorrow and do another graft back into the starters. Okay, also, we staged up another hive yesterday when we were in this yard, and what we're about to show you now is how to set up a mating nuke. And what Pat's doing is going through the top chamber of this hive. As you recall, we pulled the brood up yesterday, and all he simply has to do now is find the frames with bees and brood, and it has some honey on it, and we're going to put 3 frames of bees and brood in this mating nuke. And this is one reason that we use regular standard size nukes or 5-frame garden hives, is this enables us to be able to transfer bees and brood from a regular 10-frame hive. And since both units use the deep frames, we don't have to worry about those little bitty mating boxes. And the bees just seem to do better when you put them in a regular hive. So now that he's got 3 frames of bees and brood in this hive, we're going to seal it up and we're going to relocate it. And it has a vent in the back, so overnight it will stay closed up just as you see it. And then tomorrow we will introduce a new virgin queen in this hive. And in just a few minutes we'll take a shot of the new location where we're going to place it at. Okay, we've relocated the mating nuke, and we're going to leave it closed up. As you can see, we've got the feed jar hole stopped up with an empty cap. And what we're going to do now is put a push pin in the very front. And by putting this push pin in the very front, this is our way of marking to know exactly where we have to come back and put a queen in. So tomorrow, after 24 hours, we'll harvest a virgin queen and come back and put her in this mating nuke. And then later we're going to go over the pin marking system, which is almost the absolute necessary thing to do in running a queen breeding operation so you can keep up with what's going on where. And we have a system that tells you exactly what's going on in a hive by where we put the push pins. And we'll go over that in another portion of this video. Okay, if you recall yesterday, we made up a mating nuke, and this morning we're going into a hive we have set up as what we call a bank hive. We've got a bank frame with virgin queen stored here. And, you know, just for example, we're going to film showing Pat going into this bank hive. As you can see, when he opens this hive up, the blue frame there in the center, this is why we paint our cell bar frames and our bank frames with a unique color, so it's easy to identify which frame that the queens are stored on. So what he's doing now is pulling the bank frame up, and you can see the bees are covering up the queens, and what they're actually doing is feeding these virgin queens through the cage. And he only needs one of these, so he's going to pull one and then return the bank frame back into the hive. And next we'll go up and show how to install the virgin queens into the mating nuke. Okay, here we are at the mating nuke, and the first thing Pat's going to do is unplug the entrance. Then he's going to take the lid off and install the virgin queen. And then the last thing we'll do is put feed on top of this nuke. And he'll put the cage in by pointing the snout slightly down at an angle. And you can notice he's having to pry his bars apart just a little, but you want to put the virgin queen in kind of the back end in the center. The main thing is make sure that you never install her underneath where your feed jar is located. And this particular little nuke here is a kind of an odd shaped one, and it's a little hard for him to get his queen cage in. This is not one of our regular garden hives. Okay, that's good. He's got her in there. Next thing he's going to do now that he's got the lid on is put feed on this hive. and then we're going to come back and show you the pen placement. Okay, it's very important to document what you've done to your, when you add virgin queens in. You need to know the dates you put them in. Of course, in our operation, we're all over the place and got many mating nukes, and so what we do is use a surveying ribbon. As you can see here, he has written VQ, and today's date is July the 7th, so he put VQ77 on that ribbon. He's going to break that ribbon off, and now he will move the push pin from the front of the hive to the top of the hive, and he will stick it through this piece of ribbon. This way, as time goes on, we can come back and know exactly what date this virgin queen was installed. It also lets us know to come back after 10 days, and if for some reason she's not laying and we can't find her in there, we need to requeen this colony. Okay, we're going to ride around on the buggy and kind of show you a little footage of one of our mating yards. As you can see, we've got the 5-frame garden hives set up here, and I'm just showing you this footage so you can see kind of how we space them out. We found that putting a little distance between our hives actually makes a difference in getting the queens mated and everything. And like I said, this is just one of our little yards that we've got. We run our queens in, and here in just a minute we're going to we've got to order for some queens. So the next thing we're going to do is film actually harvesting mated queen, and we'll show you how to mark the queen and cage them up. Okay, now we're getting ready to harvest some mated queens, and before we get started, I'll just go ahead and show you we're going to use the wooden type cage. It's got the candy in one end, and like we went over in the shop, and we're going to find this queen, and on this particular order, these queens need to be marked. So we're going to try to show you how to mark them and cage them, and we're going to put the queen and 5 or 6 attendants inside the cage with her. So we're getting ready to do it, so we'll get right back with you on caging the queens. Okay, first thing we'll do is get a little smoke, but now when you're hunting queens, you don't want to over smoke the hive. If you put a lot of smoke in there, it has a tendency to make the queens run and hide. And I'm going to simply just prop this lid down. Just a little puff or two of smoke, just enough to keep the bees from getting upset. And I start by pulling the outer frame first. That gives me room to just walk across and look at the bees. And this frame has a lot of burr comb, and sometimes the queens like to get underneath this burr comb and hide. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this frame right now. I'm going to go on across and hopefully find her on the next frame. And it's important when you're handling your hives and frames with bees and everything to be gentle as you turn the frames around from one side to the other. I don't see her here. Of course, I'm in a shady spot. It would be easy for me to overlook her. I don't see her here. And sometimes it can be a challenge to find a queen, so I'm just going to prop this frame up back here and look at some of these others. And there's no guarantee she's not running the wall of this hive. She could be on the wall of the hive or somewhere, but it's probably a good chance she's behind that burr comb on this other frame. I know there's a queen in here because I can see eggs and... Found her? You see her there? This queen was particularly hard to spot because she is the exact same color as the other bees. And sometimes they do that. These Minnesota hygienic queens, they don't breed a true color. Some are dark and some are light, and some are the exact same color of the bees, and that's her. All right, so what I'm going to do in harvesting her is I'm going to reach down. Since I'm right-handed, I'm going to pick her up with my right hand. First, I'm going to prime my marking pin and make sure it's ready to go, and it is. Okay. Well, I just lost sight of her again. Where did she go? That is a hard to spot queen. There she is. Okay. I'm going to pick her up with my right hand by the wings. And now I'm going to transfer her over to my left hand, and I'm holding her front legs. And then I'm going to mark her with a blue dot. Since each year we have an international color code system, and this year is blue. But you can see I've got her marked there with a blue dot. Now I'm going to reach back over and pick her up by the wings again. And stick her head first into the cage, and then kind of coax her right on into the cage. There you can see the queen in the queen cage. Now, keeping one finger over to hold that cage, I've got to pick up some attendants and put them in with her. And there again, you pick them up by the wings, stick them in head first. Well, that one didn't want to go. Sometimes they're like trying to put a cat in a commode. They don't want to go in that hole. All right, there's one. There's two. There's three. There's four. 5. I caught that one with his head in a hole. That's an easy way to catch him. 6. And one more makes 7. We'll put 7 in here, which is actually the proper number you're supposed to put. So here we have the queen. She's marked, and we've got 7 attendants in there with her. Now we can put the cork in the other end of the cage, like so. Now this queen's ready to ship. Okay, next we're going to put the hive back together. And the very last and most important thing, once you put the lid back on the hive, is using a push pin. We put this push pin in the very front of this hive. That lets us know tomorrow that we've got to come back and put a virgin queen in here, and that will allow the virgin queen to breed, and then this colony will resume producing queens. Thank you. Okay, this portion of the video, I want to go over pin placement on the hives. We've touched on that a couple of times while we're in the field, but I think it's important that you understand exactly the process we use for pin placement. When you get several hundred hives or several hundred mating nukes scattered all out, if you don't have a system in place to know what's going on in that hive, you could very easily get confused. Now I have here some push pins. Unfortunately, the only ones I have left are purple in color that I have here with me. However, the color does not matter. What counts is where you place the pin. Okay, let's say that you have your hive sitting there, and it's established, and it has a laying queen. In other words, you actually went in the hive and you've seen eggs, brood, and the queen, and you know she's there. Okay, then in that situation, you put 2 push pins in the top of this hive. Okay, 2 push pins standing straight up means you have a verified laying queen. All right, let's say, for example, you've harvested that queen, and you come back the next day, well, once you harvest the queen, you would move your pen to the front, and it sticks straight out like this, okay? Anytime we see a pen sticking straight out in the front, that tells us that this hive needs a queen. It can, even if we're out just working hives and we find a hive and there's no sign of a queen, no eggs, no brood, but it has bees, that pen sticking out in the front tells me that it needs a queen. It has bees, but it needs a queen. So that is always your signal to know when you need a queen. All right, let's say you come back the next day and you install a virgin queen in one of your plastic cages. Once you install the virgin queen, the push pin goes on top. However, this year we've started doing something a little different. Once we install a virgin queen in the hive, we take a marking pen. You can use a permanent marker right now. I just happen to have my queen marking pen, and I'll write VQ, and today is the 7th of July, and it's 2010. So, if you can see, I put VQ 2010, then I fold that back, and that goes underneath the push pin, which is still located on top of the hive. Therefore, as I'm working my mating boxes, I'll come around and I can see that the date that virgin queen was put in. All right, one other placement that we use to push pins, sometimes when we make a hive queenless for making starters or for whatever reason, we'll run across a frame that has a beautiful queen cell. Well, sometimes I'll take that frame of bees with that queen cell and put it in a center of a garden hive with another honey frame with bees. And when I do that, I just simply put a push pin in the side. That pin in the side means there's a cell working in that hive. And you know, years ago we used to graft. When we did our graft, we harvested actual queen cells, and rather than put a virgin queen in the hive, we put cells that had not hatched yet, and that's also when we put the pin in the side. So a push pin in the side, doesn't matter if it's the right or the left side, but that pin sticking out in the side tells you that this colony needs, that this colony has a cell working. Okay, earlier we mentioned drone hives. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but in areas where we have our mating nukes at different locations, we have just regular 10-frame hives of bees. The difference is, if you notice this frame, it's just a homemade frame that we make. It's simply a piece of plastic foundation as a starter strip. Okay, on frame number 4 and number 6 in the hive, we put 2 of these in the number 4 and the number 6 location in the brood chamber. What it does is the bees will start this, and they actually draw the comb out natural. For whatever reason, when bees draw the comb out natural, they produce a lot of drone cells. So in areas we've got hives and we've got some of these scattered, you know, in through there. And that's really all you need to know about drone colonies. You just want to have drones saturated in the area where you're producing queens. So you've got plenty of drones to mate with the virgin queens. Okay, during filming this video, you saw us use, you know, like different nukes and different things, and we do have some old equipment here on the bee farm that we're really phasing out. But what I have here in front of me is a new design 5-frame garden hive that we come out with in 2010 for this season. And we've been striving here at HL Bee Farm to develop a perfect system for keeping bees. Beekeeping has changed, and we are leaning more and more to all-around 5-frame beekeeping. The reason being, bees would rather work up than out. And what we're finding is the colony can defend itself better against the small hive beetle and different things by keeping it congested. A strong congested hive is definitely the best deterrent you have against a lot of the problems with honeybees today. So I just want to show you this little 5-frame garden hive. We use them for general beekeeping by making them double deep and adding hive bodies. We've designed and built queen excluders for them. We can add honey supers. The sky's the limit. but we also use them in all around queen breeding. And it's a good little situation. If you notice, each one of our garden hives has a gate that we can close. Okay, and that comes in benefit if you need to move bees or move the hives around. On the back end, each one has a vent hole with a screen. Okay, and it's important, especially on a small hive like this, to keep some ventilation. The lid is just a box top style lid. We cut a 2 3/4 inch hole, which we put feed jars. This is the way we feed in the top. We try to keep our feed jar on the top towards the front. And then when we set the hives up, we leave a slight slope so that if the syrup were to leak out, it can drain out the hole and not cover up the bees and drown them. Each one of our garden hives comes with 5 complete wax-coated plastic frames. You'll hear different things about frames. Some beekeepers like the wood frames and the plastic foundation, but or even a real wax foundation. But I found we've got enough to do around here without having to spend time and labor putting wax in frames every year. And it's a lot easier just to pressure wash these and reuse them, bleach dip them when you need to use them. But anyway, in conclusion, I hope that the things we have shown you in this video will help you in rearing queens. We offer the complete queen rearing kit. You can always find us by going to www.hlbfarm.com. And we're always here. If we can help you in any way, just let us know. And thank you for purchasing this video, and thanks for coming along with us while we did our queen rearing.